As you might guess, I've been sewing a long time. When I was asked to organize my favorite sewing and quilting tips, as well as techniques A to Z, I took the challenge. During this three-part series, I'd like to share with you a sampling of my favorite skills. This is the second program of the three-part series. During this show, I was sharing techniques starting with the letter I through P. This may sound like an opening to Sesame Street, but as you know, it's sewing A to Z. Coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Studios, fine sewing furniture custom built in America. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing Designs and Class A Needles.
I is for interfacing. Before purchasing interfacing, think less is best, and you'll add perfect shaping to your next project. When I talk about interfacing, it's really fusible interfacing. I rarely sew in any type of interfacing. I press it into place. And as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, use a lightweight. One weight lighter than the fashion fabric is generally my guideline for interfacing. After purchasing it, rather than rolling it or folding it, I like to roll it on an empty tube, insert the instructions inside the tube so I have them there, and then that way I can store it very easily and it doesn't become wrinkled. I cut the interfacing on a 1-to-1 ratio with the collar or cuff or whatever I'm interfacing. Years ago, if I had given this seminar or this television program, I would have trimmed off the seam allowances. It's way too much work. Now I just lay it down 1-to-1, and the first thing that I do is a fuse baste. Fuse it down just periodically around or in the area of the collar, as in this instance, so that it holds and doesn't shift. Following the manufacturer's instructions with steam, I usually cover it with a press cloth and, again, just steam it into place. And within a few seconds, you'll have your interfacing positioned. The important thing is that the interfacing does not change the hand or the drape of the fabric, but it just makes it a little bit more stable. And that's what this has done. You can see it's still lightweight and pliable, but yet it has a little bit more stability to it. You may find that you'll have favorite fusible interfacings that you'll work with. Buy it in bulk so that you have it at hand, and follow these simple steps for perfect interfacing. J is for jacket sleeve linings. Here's how to fully line and hem the sleeve in one step, even if the pattern doesn't call for lining. Often I like to make simple jackets. And the jackets aren't lined, but yet having lining in the sleeve makes it easier to wear and makes the jacket look just a little bit better. So here's my technique. From the pattern piece, cut a second tissue pattern for the sleeve lining, but make it just a little bit shorter. Trim off the hem allowance. Now this is providing that this is the correct hem that you would like for your sleeve of your jacket. Then cut out the lining from that shorter pattern, and on the jacket itself I placed interfacing in the hemline, and you can see that I've pre-pressed the hem over a hem gauge or your favorite pressing tool. Then hem the sleeve first, very opposite of what we normally do. Meet the hem allowances and sew this with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. After stitching this, here's what your sleeve looks like. It's been stitched, as you might guess, and now to sew the side seam. It's really side seams that we're going to be sewing, because we would stitch matching the cut edges of the jacket sleeve, and it continuously goes into the sleeve of the lining. Pin these layers together and stitch this one long seam. This next sample shows that I've stitched them, and started to press. I have a sleeve roll inserted. I've pressed the lining section already, and now I simply just press open the jacket sleeve. I like to press over a roll because it prevents the seam allowance from making an imprint. Then, reach in the sleeve, a little magic here. We'll just grab the sleeve where it has been pressed. It's been pre-pressed. Shake it out and match the cut edges at the cap. And what you'll find is that it's already lined. The lining is shorter, just the way it should be. It's fully lined, and now you simply meet the cut edges at the top and treat this as one complete unit and set it into the armhole of your jacket. So you can line the jacket of your sleeves in this simple step. K is for knit seams. When sewing knits, there are very few rules, just guidelines. Often people steer away from working with knits, especially if they're beginner sewers, concerned that their machine cannot handle the knit fabric. I'll just give you a few ways to fine-tune your sewing machine if you do not have a stretch stitch built in. Let's look at the knits first of all. Knits have greater stretch in the crosswise knit of the fabric and less stretch in the lengthwise grain. Either way, if you used a straight stitch, you might have popping of seams, and I think you all can figure that out. Here's just a straight stitch, and this is the crosswise grain, and this is often what happens, and we don't need or want that. So we're going to change the stitch, and using a zigzag stitch is what I like to do, but I modify it. This is a traditional zigzag stitch, and the way it normally, the preset that it comes with. Rather than having it a 3.0 millimeter width, we're going to shorten it to a 1.0 width so that it wobbles. Our guest a long time ago, Betty Cotton, used this stitch as a decorative stitch on quilting. We're going to use it as a stretch stitch. The zigzag gives built-in stretch, and let me show you a sample that I have that has that same fabric that no longer pops because it was stitched with a slight zigzag, and in the needle I used a stretch needle. If you don't use a stretch needle or a ballpoint needle, your stitches may pop or skip, not even sew through the fabric. So this is a very important addition to your sewing machine. Change that needle. The very first A to Z technique was using an anchor cloth, and that's so important when working with knits. You start to sew in the middle of that little piece of fabric that you would just sew from one fabric onto the other. And this is working with a seam allowance. Just sew away, and then you'll trim away the excess anchor cloth. And then as the second thing that you'd like to do is to do a second row stitching, because with knits you do not need that full seam allowance. Trim the seam allowance down and do another row stitching so that it has stretch as well as stability. Now, a serger, probably the best stretch stitch that you can work with. I'm working with 4 threads of the serger. You can see that I have set it up according to the manufacturer's instructions. And this has great built-in stretch for crosswise grain, which I'm going to do, the crosswise stretch. I have the width of the blade set at M for Morrow, which means 1/4 of an inch. It's just a standard industry stitch. And there's an L setting that I'm simply going to guide the fabric along that area. You do not need 2 additionals or another row of stitches because this simply just gives great stretch, crosswise and lengthwise stretch. My 2 favorite seams, a wobble stitch as well as a serge stitch, and that's sewing with K. L is for layering a quilt. Fuse-based quilt layers together for an easy yet secure way of holding the layers together. Commonly, to have the top of the quilt, the batting, and the backing secured together, you'd use pins. But the fast way that I like to use is with fusible web, paperback fusible web that you cut into strips from the yardage, or you can simply use the strips that come on a roll. Choice is yours. Either way works. As with pins, you would place a pin about a fist width apart. So I'm just going to place with the fusible side down little squares, don't have to measure, just squares a couple of inches apart, and press. Another option is that you don't even have to cut them. You just fuse a section, hold it down tight, and just tear. Just fuse it, and this is a very fast way of fuse basting. So we're placing one layer, one more time, one layer on the batting and a second layer on the backing fabric. Now if you'd like, you could place these both on the underside, depending on the thickness, one more time, thickness of your batting. You can place it both on the wrong side of the batting and of the quilt top. You can see how fast that goes together. On the second sample that I have, we have the fuse sections into place, and in order to do the pressing, then you just remove the paper. And we've given these paper sections a little head start, because sometimes that's the trickiest part, is just getting the paper peeled off. Once you peel off the paper from the batting, then go to the underside and peel off, here we go, the backing area. And perhaps you might be able to see the shiny areas left. That is the web that's holding it together. Now this is not going to replace stitching. This is just replacing pinning. So we have the batting, the backing, and you've had this all nice and flat. I bet we have one more piece of paper. There we are. And then just do some pressing. Lightly press. And you'll be pleasantly surprised when you open this up. The top portion has dried. It is tacked into place. It's pinned into place with fusible web. M is for mitered corners on a quilt. Like a picture frame showcases a photo, the mitered borders frame a quilt. You don't see a full-size quilt on my table, just a small sample to show you the technique, concentrating on the borders. Add a border to the left and the right side, the east and the west side of the quilt, stopping your stitching 1/4 of an inch before the end and making certain that the border extends at least an inch beyond the width of the border. So if this is 3 inches, this would be 4 inches. Press the seam allowances toward the borders. After you've added the borders on the sides, then add borders on the top and bottom, or north and south part of the quilt, and stop stitching again at that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowances toward the borders. That's been pre-pressed. Now to make the miter. This is just a little sleight of hand. Fold the top border so it aligns evenly with the bottom border. And making certain that those extensions are matched up, press. And the pressing will give you the stitching line. When you fold back and keeping these edges aligned, you can see that edge is just where you're going to stitch. You're going to stitch in the well of the pressing area. On this sample, we've already done the stitching. Just stitch, and then you may want to test it out by opening this and testing to see if it's a flat miter. And as you might guess, the sample is right in this instance. And then we're going to trim. Trim this down to 1/4 of an inch like you normally would trim that area. Get it right, there we go. I like to have my hands underneath to make certain that I'm not cutting something I shouldn't cut. And after trimming, there we have one corner of the quilt block, just the way you'd have a miter on a picture frame, all by stitching, folding, and then doing another stitch in the press mark. It's my favorite mitering technique on a quilt border. N is for notches, the quintessential pattern marking. Notches can be marked, clipped, and even notched. It doesn't get more basic than this, working with notches on patterns, the little triangular shapes that are cut off right along with the cutting line of the pattern. And then for marking, we have some suggestions. Most of you may do the simple nipping or clipping, 1/4 of an inch or less inch little nip right at the notches. One notch is always for the front armhole, and then you'll have notches at the side seam, just a small little nip or clip right in the seam allowance. Without doing these markings, you'll have a difficult time getting the pattern pieces just where you'd like them. Some people don't always like to clip the fabric, especially if it's really ravelly. It really doesn't pay. So another option is to use a marking pen. If we would like notches marked, I simply just fold this back a little bit and then have this on the wrong side rather than the right side, and mark notches and notches right across from the marking right on the pattern piece. In college, when I was doing some pattern drafting and designing, we used a notcher like this to mark the cardboard or the manila type weight of sloper, it was called, that we drafted patterns with, and it takes out a notch of the paper. We've incorporated this into sewing, used when you're going to be serging a seam. Rather than using the other two marking tools, we notch out a section, and it really is quite a large section that comes out. And let me show you up here maybe one more time so you can almost hear it cut through the fabric. And you get a substantial notch that comes out of the fabric. Now the reason for doing this, if you're serging the edges, you can't see the nips, many times can't see the markings. Here we have serged over the edge, and you still have a little opening so that you know where the notches are. 3 ways to mark notches, a sewing basic. O is for organizing fabric. Use pocket folders and a few clever folds to tame unwieldy fabric. Here's how. Sometimes my fabric stash is really unorganized, and when I take a few minutes to organize it, this is what it looks like. And it's well worth it because then I can see what I have. So here is my solution. And one day one of my kids' school folders was lying around, and I just decided to use that as an organizing tool. Here's the fabric, 45 inches. I'll just turn it the other way so you can see the fold already, and fold it in half again so that it's about 11 inches wide. So we have a folder that's 12 inches or so, and we use this folder simply as a base. And you can organize the fabric as you go along. Kind of folding it, fold the corner in half, fold it around, and then tuck in the corner. And then get a paper clip or a pin or a hair clip, whatever you may have at home. Clip the end, pull out the folder, the school folder, the pocket folder, and you have fabric that's easy to coordinate. If you have fabric that has been cut, just simply fold the straight edge first and have the cut edge, the unwieldy edge right in this area. Tuck it in, and you have organized fabric. One of my simplest organizing techniques. P is for pin tucks. Take the guesswork out of creating even rows of stitching with my favorite techniques. When working with heirloom sewing, whether it's for creating children's wear or for working in home decorating, equally stitched tucks to add texture is simple to do as long as you have the right accessories. And the main accessory will be the foot. The pin tuck foot is found in most of the accessory boxes. It may be metal, it may be plastic, and on the underside you'll see grooves. Grooves that will be 5, perhaps 7. The more grooves that there are, the closer the stitching will become. Earlier in this series we did D's for double needles, and I showed you how to set up a double needle stitching with needles 2.0 for heirloom sewing, which we're going to be using, and with the thread unwinding in different directions so it doesn't twist. The first row of stitching is done with a marked line on the fabric so that you're just stitching along that line so slowly so that you get it straight, because this will determine the distances and the straightness of the other rows of stitching. After one row of stitching, I like to just really cut my threads by hand this time so I have a nice thread. Then I place the groove, and I'm going to place the second groove from the end over the first row of stitching. Now I did starch my fabric. I'm working with a lightweight fabric, and I find that if I make it crisp, it sews a little bit easier because we're working, as you can see, with lightweight fabrics, and there you can see you can get equal distance between the rows. It's very simple, it's not very difficult. It just requires the setup, the double needle, the pin tuck foot, making certain that the threads are unwinding in different directions, and you can get these rows perfectly even because of these guidelines. So, if you're working with children's wear, if you're working with heirloom sewing, perhaps making a decorative pillow, this is a great way to add texture as well as interest. My assumption is that my Nancy's Corner guest never thought he'd be quilting when he was an architect in Dallas, nor did he think that his dining room wall would become a design wall for quilt blocks when he was working with websites full-time. Yet, as life's paths changed, so did my guest, Bruce Seitz.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Bruce. And Bruce, you marry color, detail, artistry in quilts, and you've used your architect abilities, your web design abilities, now into fabric.
Yes, the precision required to really make this type of quilt come off right is very appealing to me. And yet the fact that I don't plan it ahead and I have to make it up as I go is a challenge, but also provides a lot of the delight.
Now, as history has it, about 2008, you found your career in flux.
Yes, well, I'm sure everyone remembers the downturn of 2008.
Sure.
And so I had some time on my hand as the website business was waning a little bit. And so I saw this book, One Block Wonders by Maxine Rosenthal, and I'd never seen quilts that looked like what I saw in this book. And I said, well, I have a 30-year-old Kenmore sewing machine. I'm going to try it.
Sure.
And I did.
And you, first time quilting?
Yes, I had made one small log cabin quilt about this big a while back, and that's the only thing I made.
And you start out with one fabric, one print fabric.
This process starts with one large piece of a print fabric, in this case an oriental print.
And let's show our viewers.
Sure, I incorporate a piece of the original fabric into the back of each of my quilts. So this one is a lot of blossoms and water, and there's even a little Asian temple in there somewhere. But I divide it into stacks of 6 identical triangles, and then I arrange those radially into hexagons to create something like what you'd see through a kaleidoscope. And then I use those as units to compose on the wall and compose the overall quilt.
Putting the 6 triangles together and then designing.
Yeah, and the design starts, it really starts when you start cutting, but it really starts when you start composing each hexagon, because each set of 6 triangles could be oriented one of 3 ways. And so I play with those until I get the one that I like, and then I move on.
Now you can see this is a beautiful quilt, but wait till you see them in their full size. And this quilt you just finished.
Yes, it's I call it geologic, and because it reminded me of a geologic fissure, perhaps geodes, amethyst, and I wanted the long, strong fissure going diagonally through the quilt, and I even broke through the border and headed off to the edge of the quilt.
Violating that border is always a good thing.
It's a lot of fun. It creates instant 3-dimensionality.
And that has, when I saw that, I thought, I know you're an architect because it really does have earth and a lot of symmetry in it, plus great design.
Thank you.
Then you've taken another look and worked with a much brighter fabric in oranges.
Yes, this one started out as a print of poppies. Oranges and pinks, and divided up and put together. I found the orange wanted to sort of go into a swirling pattern. I created a giant swirl. I solicit feedback from my fans on Facebook. I had a friend who suggested it looked like a dragon. I set the eyes and said, dragon it is, and so that quilt's name is Dragon. And
aptly named. It's really fun.
Thanks.
Now, I know you've made several quilts using this concept.
Yes.
And you never tire of it.
No, and the reason I don't is because when I start, I do not know what it's going to be. Coming from architecture and web design, I'm trained and used to conceiving, planning, and then executing the plan. Whereas with this, I can't preconceive it. I do not know what it's going to be until it's done. I simply start executing, and the creativity and the design comes through the process, and that keeps me interested and engaged, and I just keep going.
You strike me as we share being type A personalities.
Yes, absolutely.
So I never like to do the same thing over and over again.
I don't either.
And so this gives you that creativity.
Each one is different. You could not create 2 identical quilts using this process if you wanted to. I mean, no,
you'd have to try really hard.
It would be very hard.
Well, Bruce, great job. Very inspiring. keep in mind that you can start quilting at any time, and for more information on Bruce Seeds quilts, simply go to nancyzieman.com and click on Nancy's Corner. There you'll find information on Bruce. Also at nancyzieman.com, you'll also see additional episodes online. You'll find my blog and a lot more. Thanks for joining us, Bruce.
Thank you, Nancy.
And thank you for being with us on Sewing with Nancy during our second program of Sewing A to Z. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.
Nancy has written a full-color, fully illustrated book entitled Nancy Zieman Sewing A to Z that includes all the information featured in this series. It's $19.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2501. Order item number Y0005. Nancy Zieman Sewing A to Z. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at nancyzieman.com to see additional episodes, Nancy's blog, and more. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, has been brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Studios, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Class A Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.